This video is intended to give you some guidance on how to learn and perform the snare drum audition music. The theme is the first line, then starting in measure 8 to measure 17, that's variation 1. It's not labeled as that, but that's what it is. And so at the end of measure 17, and also at the end of measure 12, and at the end of measure 7, you're going to see the little double bar. Those refer to the variations. 18. So this is the beginning of variation 2. Variation 3 begins in measure 26. Variation 4 begins right before measure 30. And if you look underneath even year audition material, play to the end of the variation with which you are the most comfortable. As you can tell as you look down the page, the details and the difficulty become greater and greater. Go as far as you can. The idea is to play whatever you can play with quality, instead of trying to play the whole thing, but it's not that great. Right? So give us your best performance with as much music as you can. We'll hop right in. There's just a couple things to know. Anytime you see a Z through the note head, that just means you're going to do a buzz roll. And if you look down at the second to last line, a little bit past the center measure, you have the single slash that goes through the stem, and those are going to be open rolls, which are diddles. Right? And so I'll talk more about that when we get there. Starting right off with measure 1, we have 2 flams. Use right hand lead sticking throughout this. So in this case we have quarter notes all the way through, so beats 1 and 3 are going to be the right, beats 2 and 4 are going to be on the left. That being said, make sure your grace notes are nice and low, don't even need to lift up for them, and when you play them, especially between beat 1 and beat 3, you want to make sure that the space between the grace note and the principal note are exactly the same. That's what's going to make a good performance great. And during this we're going to be playing this at 80, which is the suggested performance tempo. So here we go, we're playing the first measure, playing the flams, keep the grace note low, and keep the flams nice and tight. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay? One more time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1. Okay? Now as you play that, like I said, make sure all the flams are exactly the same as each other. When you get to the second measure, this is the first time we're going to be playing a left hand flam. Right, left, and then you play the buzz roll. Between the 2 flams, 1, 2, make sure you're a bit robotic about how you go from one to the next. You always want to be preparing as early as you can for what's coming next. So in that case, that means as soon as you play it, the millisecond after beat 1 happens, you're already in the position for beat 2. Beat 3 and 4, you have your half note. Buzz roll, you're going to pulse in 16th notes, right? So the skeleton rhythm will be 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. And you'll be doing buzz rolls during that. So at our speed, 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. So the whole measure sounds like this. And 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. 2, again, and go. And 1 and 2 and 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. And notice after beat 2, I just keep my sticks down because we don't want the roll to be that loud. Or it can be the same volume as everything before it, so mezzo forte, but it does not need to be very high off the drum. Once you start doing that, you start to hear the roll sound uneven, something like that. But if you keep it at a more, I guess, tame stick height, it helps it sound more smooth. So let's play that one more time with that in mind. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4 and a 1. And you notice that the volume doesn't sound that different. So, pro tip. Okay, so this is measure 3. So check out your sticking. Should be right, left, and then followed by the flam and as the release into measure 4. Here we go. 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, again and go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. And 1, 3 and 4 and 1. Cool. Measure 4. Everything that we've seen in here, we've seen before. So we'll just hop right in there. And 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4 and a 1 and 2, again, ready and go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4 and a 1, 2, again, last time. And 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4 and a 1. Cool. Measure 5, nothing new here. Measure 6 is the same as measure 5, so nothing new, but let's just focus on measure 5 real quick. Just play it by itself. 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 E and a 4 E and a 1, 2, again and go. And 1 and 2 and 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. Cool. Measure 6. Let's add that in. So we're playing measure 5 and 6 together. 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and 2 and 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. Something to notice is, at the end of all these rolls, the rolls are tied to a quarter note in all these cases. So you only will roll on the notes that have the Z in them. So when it's tied to the release, don't buzz that. So 3E and a, 4E and a are all buzzed, and then 1 is just going to be a single stroke. 3E and a, 4E and a 1. Measure 7, lots of space. It's just the release to the roll that came before it. But make sure you're counting, right? So, like 3E and a, 4E and a 1 and 2, and getting ready for the next thing. Let's play measure 1 to the downbeat of measure 7. And 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3E and a, 4E and a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. 2 and 3E and a, 4E and a 1 and 2 and 3E and a, 4E and a 1 and 2 and 3E and a, 4E and a 1, 2, 3, 4, and that would have been where measure 8 starts. So you can see why it's important to continue to count even when the measure looks easy. So now we're going on to measure 8, and all of a sudden we have rolls on eighth notes. So the skeleton rhythm that we're going to play is still 16th notes. So the skeleton rhythm in that first measure is 1, 2 E and 3, and then the end of 4. Okay? So that will sound like this. 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1, 2 E and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2 E and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. And 1, 2 E and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, last time, ready, go. And 1, 2 E and 3 and 4 and 1. Alright, measure 9 we can put together based on what we've already learned in this. So tap, flam, flam. Here we go. And 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And notice that it's important to count through that half note, which has some length to it, right? It has 4 pulses. Measure 10. This looks a lot like measure 8, except where we place that last flam, which will be on beat 4 instead of the end of beat 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And just again to remind you, when you play the roll, that's the 5-stroke roll, you're going to buzz, buzz, tap. That last note should not be buzzed, just a single tap. And you want it to sound as smooth as you can make it. Here we go, measure 11. 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Alright, looking at measure 12, we can see it looks a lot like measure 9. Kind of a quirky thing is that on the last note you have a flam, but you also have a tie. So what I recommend you do is ignore the tie. What I think they tried to do is they wanted that to be a roll, but they didn't put the roll slash on it. Then it becomes weird because do you really want to put a flam when there should have been a roll? Well, it's not impossible, but it's a little odd. So what we'll do is we'll just play a normal flam and ignore the tie. That way when you start on measure 13 on the paradiddle crescendo, you'll just play all the notes as written. So here we go, this is measure 12. And 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And when you play the downbeat of 13, you want to play it a little bit softer so that you have room for the crescendo. Yes, it's true that you're starting at mezzo forte and you're going up to forte, but it never hurts to give a little extra crescendo whenever you can. It makes it more interesting to listen to. So here we are, we're in measure 13, playing paradiddles. Notice that there are no accents, but we do have a dynamic shift, starting a little bit softer and getting up to that forte level. Here we go. And 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, don't get too loud. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. You want to play this as if you would be playing it on a drum. And on a pad, of course, it's easier to play louder without any consequences for your ears hurting. But, you know, imagine that you are playing it on a drum. So here we go. 13, 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, continuing on from measure 14. We've seen things that look exactly like this before. So there is a dynamic change. It's not a big one, just forte to mezzo forte. Here we go. And 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, again, and go. And 1, 2, 3 and a 4 and a 1. So notice that it does get a little softer, but you know, like I said, only down to what was a loud dynamic to a medium dynamic. Alright, so now in measure 15 we have paradiddles with the accents this time. Measure 13, there were no accents, and now in measure 15 there are. So, the accent height should be just a little bit higher than the tap height. Here we go. Measure 15, 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And notice that the release does not have an accent. Here we go, measure 16. Notice you have a 5-stroke roll on beat 3, 3 and. That's all you gotta worry about. Measure 16. 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1. Measure 17. Just seeing a lot of the same as we've seen before. 5-stroke roll on beat 1, which is 1 E and. And 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 E and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. 1 E and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. And 1 E and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Measure 18 through 25, we have a couple dynamic shifts, and those dynamic shifts are great enough where we're going to go from the center of the pad to about halfway. Looking at measure 20 and 21, you'll see that goes from forte, diminuendo, to mezzo piano, right? So mezzo piano is that magic middle dynamic level. It's not too soft, it's not too loud, but as such, we're also going to play halfway between the edge of the pad and the center of the pad. And if we were on a drum, we would do the same thing. Instead of playing just off center like we would normally do for, your average dynamic level, when we play softly on a drum, we play out by the edge. This is that medium dynamic level where we play halfway. Okay, so this is measure 18. We have a rhythm, a dotted rhythm on beat 3, 3, and 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2, ready and go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Measure 19. Notice we have our 9-stroke roll again. We saw those, well actually we haven't seen these yet, right? But we had a longer roll in the first line, right? Those series of half-note rolls, which are 17-stroke rolls. We didn't name them before, but here they are. But here we are, we have 9-stroke rolls in measure 19. And that's just gonna be a skeleton rhythm of 3 E and a 4. Here we go. 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4. 1, 2, ready, go. 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4. 1, 2, ready, go. 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4. 1. Measure 20. We have 2 more 9-stroke rolls, and this is where we start to go from the center of the pad to about halfway between the edge and the center. Still the same skeleton rhythm because it's the same rudiment, which is that 9-stroke roll. This is measure 20. 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4. 1. Notice how I moved out. 1 and 2 again, ready, go. And 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4. 1, 2, ready, go. 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4. 1, 2, ready, go. 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4. 1. Now we're at measure 21. Kind of more of the same. We have the 9-stroke roll and some 8th notes and quarter notes. So even though we're playing a little bit softer, still get a good quality of sound. 1 and 2, 21 and go. And 1 E and a 2 and 3, 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. And 1 E and a 2 and 3, 4 and 1. Now measure 22. We're at the beginning of the next line, but that dynamic from the previous measure is going to stay there. So we're still at mezzo piano. Halfway, not very loud. Here we go. This is measure 22, and counting carefully, 1 E and a 2, 3 and a 4 and 1. Here we go. 1 and 2 and ready and a go. 1 E and a 2, 3 and a 4 and 1. And it's important when you get 3 and a 4 and 1 that the sticking is proper with what we expect that check pattern sticking to be. So 3 and a is going to be right, right, left. Alright, so 3 and a 4 and 1. Right, right, left, right. Here we go, playing measure 22 again. And 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 E and a 2, 3 and a 4 and 1, 2, 22, go. And 1 E and a 2, 3 and a 4 and 1. 23, exactly the same. Here we go. 23, 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 E and a 2, 3 and a 4 and 1. Play measure 22 and 23 together. Same thing twice. Think ahead when it comes to the repeat. And 1 and 2, 22, go. And 1 E and a 2, 3 and a 4 and 1 E and a 2, 3 and a 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. And 1 E and a 2, 3 and a 4 and 1 E and a 2, 3 and a 4 and 1. And remember, this is still mezzo piano. It's not very loud. Now we are at measure 24, where we have 4 quarter notes. 3 of them are flams. All of them are getting softer, and we're going out to the edge. So by the time you get to the 16th notes in measure 25, you should be out at the edge playing very softly. In between each flam, make sure you are still being very robotic about getting to the next flam. 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Is that last note a flam? No. 2, ready, go. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Notice that even though my strokes are getting softer and smaller, I'm still counting with the same amount of intensity. Because the rhythm and the metronome and the tempo, none of that changes. That's always constant. It's the music that changes around it. And so we build all these muscles and bring all this vocabulary into our playing so that this can be the interesting part, whereas, you know, but the metronome is a tool. So now we're at measure 25. This is piano, out by the edge, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3. 1 and 2 and ready and a go. And 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 and 1. Now that downbeat that I just played at 26 is mezzo piano, right? So we went from the edge to halfway again. 1, 2, ready and a go. And 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 and 1. And there's all that space in there that I'm still counting, and 4 and 1. And during that time I can move my sticks in a nice relaxed, slow, relaxed manner, and then I can play that note, that release. So we're going to play all of variation 2, which is starting at measure 18, going to the downbeat of 26. And 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1, 2 and 3 E and a 4 and 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4. 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4. 1 E and a 2 and 3. 4 and 1 E and a 2, 3 and a 4 and 1 E and a 2, 3 and a 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 and 1. Now we're going to play all of variation 1, which is starting at measure 8 and stopping at the downbeat of measure 18. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 E and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 E and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 E and 4. 1 E and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Variation 3. So, taking a look at this whole line, we have, as far as rudiments go, we have our 5-stroke rolls in the first and third measure. We have accents in the last measure, and the sticking on those accents will be right, left, right, just a little bit faster. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3. Alright, so you're going to need good stick control of ups and downs. And then we have our dynamics going from 1 E and a 2 E and a 3. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3, right? I'm not trying to get as loud as I can in that little bit of time. I'm just rising up a little bit, like 1 or 2 dynamic levels. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3. So let's go measure by measure. This is measure 26. And 1 and 2, halfway, ready and go. And 1 and a 2 E and a 3 E and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. And 1 and a 2 E and a 3 E and 4 and 1. Measure 27. The rhythm is simple. Just make sure you're controlling going up the dynamic and down the dynamic. 1, 2, ready and a go. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 and 1, 2, ready, go. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 and 1. Measure 28. We have a flam and a 5-stroke roll, not in that order. Skeleton roll on beat 2, 2 E and you have your flam on beat 4. Leave the grace note nice and low. So 3 E and 4, 3 E and. Notice that hand stays low. 4, 3 E and 4, 3 E and 4. Play with me. 3 E and 4, 3 E and 4, 3 E and 4, 3 E and stop. 1 and 2 and ready and a go. 1 and a 2 E and 3 E and 4. 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and a 2 E and 3 E and 4. 1. Alright, and measure 29. Now you'll notice measure 29 only has 3 beats written, but if you look at the beginning of what is marked as measure 30, you have what is beat 4. Alright, so that'll be important when we go from one line to the next on this. If you are planning on ending here, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3, and just stop right there. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 and 1. If you are continuing on, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 E and a 1. Here we go, let's play measure 29. And I'm going to play the entire measure, which includes what is labeled measure 30, because that is the full measure. So here we go. Measure 29. 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 E and a 1. 2, ready, go. And 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 E and a 1. So now we're going to play all of variation 3. So this is starting in measure 26 and playing that entire line and the first 4 notes of the next. 1 and 2 and ready, go. And 1 and a 2 E and a 3 E and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 and 1 and a 2 E and 3 E and 4. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 E and a 1. Variation 4, I'm going to go through this a little bit quicker. We're starting at measure 30. It's the start of the second to last line, and that's going to be on the E and a of 4. So then we change time signatures. We're going to do 2-4. It's kind of business as usual. First couple measures, just play the correct sticking, check pattern sticking. Keep your flam nice and good. That's going to be a left hand flam. So 1 E and 2 and. So E and a 1 and a 2 and a 1 E and 2 and. 33. Which has the diddles that I had mentioned before. Now these are not buzz rolls. We're not going to play it like this. Instead, we're going to play diddles. So that's going to be 1 bounce on each hand. When you put them together, you get the open roll instead of the closed roll. So here's the closed and the open. So you're going to want to have loose back fingers and maybe tighten up a little bit on the front of your grip. Now if you are too tight on the front of your grip, you're going to get this. And you hear how you had 2 notes, and then a release? Well, we want it to sound like digga digga down, not digga digga da, digga digga da. That's not even. Instead, loosen up that front part of your grip, but also use your back fingers to help you. If you notice here, there's some wiggle room. I'm not clamping down on the stick. If you do, it's going to sound too tight and you're not going to be able to do it as fast. So instead, open that up and then use the front part of your grip and some of your back fingers as well, like that, to help you play this just like that. You can do some exercises such as chicken in a roll, which you can see on some of the other videos of this YouTube playlist if you look into my channel, which I believe is in your Schoology or Google Classroom. So 33, and 1, and 2, and ready, go, and 1, and a 2, and a 1, and 2, and ready, go, and 1, and a 2, and a 1, 2, ready, go, and 1, and a 2, and a 1. Measure 34 looks the same as measure 32, so we'll play that. 1, and 2, and ready, go, and 1, and 2, and 1. So now measure 35 looks much the same as measure 29, how we ended variation 3. Let's play that, measure 35. 1, and 2, and ready, go, and 1, E, and a 2, E, and a 1, 2, ready, go, and 1, E, and a 2, E, and a 1. Measure 36, we are at mezzo piano, so starting with an accent, 1, and then crescendo, 2, E, and a 1. Right, here we go. 36, 1, and 2, and ready, go, and 1, and 2, E, and a 1, 2, ready, go, and 1, and 2, E, and a 1. And really, 35 and 36 are meant to go together. 1, E, and a 2, E, and a 1, and 2, E, and a 1. Here we go, measure 37, and 1, and 2, and ready, go. 1, and a 2, E, and a 1, 2, ready, go. 1, and a 2, E, and a 1. And measure 38. You'll see that you have what is known as a drag, right? And the drag and the flam are accented. The attack first note is not. So 1. And the thing about the drag is you want to make sure you're getting only 2 grace notes and 1 principal note. So we're not looking for just a buzz. It's not that, where you put as many notes as you can. It should be a very fast but unmeasured diddle. And when I say unmeasured, I just mean it's not any specific defined rhythm, at least in this situation, right? Notice whether I'm playing a drag or a flam, my grace notes are nice and low, and just like the flams from before, even though it's a drag, I'm being a little bit more robotic with the motions, so that I can prepare for what's coming next as early as possible. So starting in measure 30, playing all of variation 4, so when I count it off, I'm going to play the pickups E and a 1 into measure 31. 1, and 2, and ready, go. E and a 1, and a 2, and a 1, E, and 2, and 1, and a 2, and a 1, E, and 2, and 1, E, and a 2, E, and a 1, and 2, E, and a 1, and a 2, E, and a 1. One more time. 1, and 2, and 1, and 2, E, and a 1, and a 2, and a 1, E, and 2, and 1, and a 2, and a 1, E, and 2, and 1, E, and a 2, E, and a 1, and 2, E, and a 1, and a 2, E, and a 1, and 2. And now I'll do a performance, the entire audition etude, from the beginning. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and a 4, E, and a 1. 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and a 4, E, and a 1, 2, 3, and a 4, E, and a 1, 2, 3, and a 4, E, and a 1, 2. Here's variation 1, and go. And 1, 2, E, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, E, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and a 4, and a 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, 1, E, and 2, and 3. Variation 2, 1, 2 and 3 E and a 4 and 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4. A little louder. 1 E and a 2 and 3 E and a 4. 1 E and a 2 and 3. 4 and 1 E and a 2. 3 and a 4 and 1 E and a 2. 3 and a 4 and 1. Softer. 2 edge. 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3. Now mezzo piano. Variation 3. 1 and a 2 E and a 3 E and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 and 1 and a 2 E and 3 E and 4. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 E and a 1 and a 2 and a 1 E and 2 and 1 and a 2 and a 1 E and 2 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 and 2 E and a 1 and a 2 E and a 1 and 2. So as you can tell, when you go from one section to another, you're going to need to plan and have practiced the transitions between them. So, best of luck with your audition. I look forward to hearing your performances.